recorded live.
Hello and welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror, movies, and awesomeness. This week we kick off our look at the Werewolf movies with Lon Chaney Jr. in The Wolfman from Universal, 1941. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have, so warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, writer of the upcoming Ben 10 comic series from IDW. With me, from Austin, is Drew Edwards, writer of the long-running comic Halloween Man, now from Monsterverse Comics, and a contributing writer to Rockabilly Online and Monsterverse's Tales from the Grave. Say hello, Drew.
Hello.
Hello. Also in Austin, Tony Salvaggio, writer of the Victorian mech comic Clockworks from Humanoids, and Psychom, the manga from Right Stuff and Tokyopop, and lead singer of the band Deserts of Mars. Say hello, Tony.
Hi.
And also in Denver, with color commentary, as always, host of the mom-oriented podcast Pod Moms, attorney Joya Guzman. Say hello, Joya.
Hello, and I also want to say thank you to our veterans, since we're observing Veterans Day today.
It is indeed Veterans Day. Here we go. Okay, The Wolfman is a 1941 American werewolf horror film written by Kurt Schomack, and I'm going to say it that way because I have no idea how to pronounce his name.
Sodomak.
Sodomak?
Sodomak. That's how I've always heard it pronounced. Now, whether or not that's right, I don't know.
It looks like Siodmak to me, or Siodmak. Anyway, whatever.
I think Julie is probably doing it better than me, but that's how I've always heard it pronounced.
I'm going to say Siodmak. Kurt Siodmak, and produced and directed by George Wagner. This film stars Lon Chaney Jr., the enormous, as the Wolfman, and features Claude Rains, Evelyn Ankers, Ralph Bellamy, Patrick Knowles, Bela Lugosi, 10 years after his turn as Dracula, and Maria Ushbenskaya. The title character has a great deal of influence on Hollywood's depictions of the legend of the werewolf, so saith Wikipedia. So, let's get started, and I think, Tony, we haven't done first impressions from you in a while, so, I mean, to top us off.
Yes.
So, first impressions, we're going to go Tony, Joya, Drew, and I know you're a big fan of this, and then I'll give a brief thing, and we'll get started. Tony, first impressions, The Wolfman.
I like revisiting the classics because, and I even worked on a game that never shipped that had a Universal kid monsters in it. So these movies definitely speak to me. I got to animate a kid Wolfman that I don't think made it. Actually, I think it made it to a Game Boy version or something. Anyway, I love these movies. This was really short and sweet, and it definitely, like most Universal monster movies, set the tone, and I think that a lot of the makeup for a long time, what we know of as the legend of, even despite what history may have really said about these creatures, like these Universal movies became the legend, You'll see people talk about Larry Talbot and, the monster,
right?
Or Frankenstein if they call the monster Frankenstein, And like these, going back and revisiting classics, it's really interesting to see the seeds that just, for whatever reason, these were the movies, no matter what anybody else did, this influenced everyone who's, I think, making monster movies, or influenced them to go, I'm not going to do that stodgy old thing, I'm going to do something new. But for whatever reaction, this is, where it starts, more or less, as far as film history goes, in my opinion, There's, of course, things before and legends before, but I think it's the Universal monster movies like this one that set the tone for what we have here in America.
You'd be hard-pressed to find them, and I'm hoping that Drew can shed some light on what in the heck gave us the Wolfman. Julia, as always, I love hearing your sort of, your newbie thoughts to werewolf and horror movies. So, Julia, tell us first impressions, The Wolfman.
Well, it's particularly entertaining watching it because we watched it with our 8-year-old. Yes. Because we figured she could handle this one. And so that was really fun, because just to hear her random commentary throughout the movie. So we'll throw in a couple of those delightful observations as we go along. But
she was a harsh critic of the Wolfman.
But it was it's really interesting to me me after having seen the movies that we've seen to see kind of where it all began. Basically, you know, I know there's a few before this, but I'm interested to hear kind of like I said to you earlier, Jason, that I'm really curious to hear what you guys have to say about the what came before and kind of the context of this film. And then I've actually been reading just now about the political context and how basically this is like a metaphor for Nazi Germany, which I thought was really interesting. So,
okay, you'll have to explain that when we get into the context section.
Yeah,
I have never heard of that, but I'm interested.
Apparently, it's on the DVD commentary.
I knew we needed to listen to that. All right, Drew, what are your first impressions of The Wolfman?
Well, this is one of my all-time favorite monster movies, and when I was a kid, this is certainly one of the first movies that really lit my imagination on fire. In fact, one of my very first, if not the first, Halloween costumes I ever did was the Wolfman, and I've done the Wolfman multiple times in my life just because I love this movie so much. And this, in many ways, is the prototype werewolf movie. It'd be very difficult to find a werewolf movie that does not have even just a little bit of this in its DNA. Now, you know, Werewolf of London was probably the first mainstream werewolf movie, and that was from 1935, and it's also a really fun movie. But this has got the punch, this has got the power, this has got the pathos. I love this movie.
I've seen Werewolf of London, and I liked Werewolf of London a lot. I mean, you know, I was surprised watching it at how modern it feels, and that it certainly doesn't feel any more dated than the Wolfman, but it's a cold piece compared with this. I mean, you know, I don't know. This is where Lon Chaney Jr. gets a hold of this role, and this would become almost as much as Lenny, which is the thing that really made Lon Chaney Jr. famous, was that he played Lenny in Of Mice and Men with Burgess Meredith. But this role here is the thing I think that I've always associated with Lon Chaney Jr. with. So it's really cool to see him do it. It's exciting. It clips along at 70 minutes. You know, it's definitely worth seeing. And we've talked about the Universal horrors a lot, and we've never thought about taking them in order. We talked about Young Frankenstein and said that Young Frankenstein would belong like on the shelf next to your collection of Universal horrors. Well, this is one of the primary texts, and it's I don't know, it's really cool. I apologize to the listeners that every time we get into one of these classic horrors, there's not a single one of us that goes, oh, I don't understand why we were forced to watch this. It just never happens. All of us go, boy, what fun it is to revisit this stuff.
It just seems like it would be disrespectful to do that.
Yeah, but I swear to God, we mean it. I actually really, really enjoyed watching The Wolfman. So, you know, maybe my life is just full of joy, and that's just the way it is. Okay, topics. Joy, I wanted to talk about, and I think it's a perfectly good question, is the context of this movie, meaning where does this film, The Wolfman, fit into horror films when it came out and Universal horror? And if you want to, you can explain what the heck is up with the werewolf legend in general. And then we'll get into Larry Talbot, this particular Wolfman. But, Drew, I know you're heavily familiar with Universal horror. Do you have any... Can you explain where this movie fits in to the
Well, the Wolfman, or at least the concept for the Wolfman, began as an aborted project for Boris Karloff, and it was a completely different story. It was a completely different script. Basically, the screenwriter Kurt Siodmak took the title that they had already worked out, which is The Wolfman, and went off in this completely different direction. Now, and you want to talk about cultural context. You know, this movie came out right in the middle of World War II, and what Universal was really peddling with these monster movies at that time period was escapism, and this is an excellent example of that. It takes place in a very non-specific place. Like I said, the screenplay said it was supposed to be in Wales, but the director, George Wagner, didn't want any implicit mention of the nation of Wales. So you've got this non-specific European landscape where World War II is...
For a second. this place, yeah, you're right. When you say nonspecific, it's even more nonspecific than the Hammerscape. Because, we've talked about that world that Hammer's in, but at least there, everyone's British.
Yeah, because you have this weird, everybody's got weird different accents. You've got this weird, wood, kind of wooded area with all the mist, so that could be the United Kingdom. But then suddenly they wander into these gypsy, villages. So I'm just like, well, then it's like more like Romania or something. Yes. I mean, I guess they have that in other parts of Europe, but it just seems like that's, I don't know. It is very non-specific.
It is. Well, the idea was that they were making not just horror films, but they're basically filming fairy tales. And this movie, I think, if you were take it and compare it to what Val Lewton was doing at the same time period, this is a much more fanciful, whimsical might not be the right word, but much more fantasy-oriented quality to it. And the world of the Universal Monsters is definitely a very, very, very rich fantasy world.
I liked how you said that about that they're fairy tales. Because, for instance, the Hammer movies have an innocence about them, but they're not fairy tales. They're kind of sexed-up thrillers. These really do have this feel of magic to them, even in the modern world. And so I'm not aware, by the way, that there was. I mean, the werewolf legend, to my knowledge, was even less well-formed than the vampire legend before. But the thing is, our concept of the vampire legend is so wrapped up in Universal horror that, even more so than Dracula the book, Dracula the movie gives us a lot of ideas. And the same thing here. I mean, I think that Universal horror really influences, like Tony was saying, what we think werewolves are. It's a person that gets bit by a werewolf, and then they get turned into one somehow or another. I get in this movie they say they become one at night under whatever conditions are right, and they're allergic to silver. There's that silver business. There's something having to do with wolfsbane, which is this plant.
Yeah, the quote is even a man who is pure at heart and says his prayers at night may become a wolf when the wolfbane blooms and the autumn moon is bright. And it says that's listed as in some places they talk about it being an authentic Gypsy or Eastern European folk saying, but this I'm reading from IMDb. The writer Kurt, however you pronounce it, Siodmak, whatever, says that he made it up. That wrote it.
That poem gets recited. Did you guys notice this? Basically, as that poem gets recited by no less than 3 different people in this movie before he even starts turning into a werewolf. It's like Larry Talbot. Just to give the 30-second view of what's going on here. And a man who has spent the last 20 years in America returns home on the death of his brother to his castle, where he basically is heir to the entire estate. And his father is there, who's kind of been estranged with him, and he's been away, and God knows what he's been doing, but we do know that he's been working for some astronomical firms, and he's been building telescopes, and he's been working in some high-tech industries, although he's not a scientist. And he comes back, and immediately he keeps finding situations where people are reciting this poem about how somebody can turn into a werewolf, even though they are pure of heart. And then that leads into the plot where he does get bitten by somebody who turns out to be a werewolf, and he becomes a werewolf. But I loved how in the script he keeps running into people who want to tell him basically about how close they are to the fantasy world in this,
on a side note, one of my favorite thrash metal bands, Wrathchild America, used it, except they changed it to may become a bat when the vampire prowls and the moon is full and bright. They have a song called London After Midnight, which is about vampires, of course.
This is such a popular poem.
But it's such a hearing that over and over, I was also thinking, I don't know, for some reason I was also like, man, I have that on tape, but I don't have that on CD now.
Yes.
And man, I wish I had that. And then this, the poem keeps coming up. I'm like, oh, man. So now I have both nostalgia for Universal Monsters yet again, and as well as Wrathchild America, which... Right.
No, I mean, that poem turns up, it gets used again, not just here, but in later movies. They change it a tiny little bit. but it gets used so much that they even quoted it on Dark Shadows as though it was actually a classic. Not a classic, but a truly folkloric poem. And I have no doubt that the guy writing Dark Shadows didn't bother to look it up.
What is folklore except for legends passed among people? So something created by Hollywood is just as legitimate as something created by European peasants.
Absolutely, it sure is by now. And in fact, I've often wondered about that. There's that great quote, and I can't remember what philosopher wrote it, but he said, that memory and imagination are the same thing called by diverse names. To some extent, this stuff is occupying the same space in our brain as whatever we might read about famous legends. And now it's nearly 100 years since they made these movies. And so
Patricia Hampel is the name. I just plugged it into the Google machine.
Of what?
The person who said that, the author who said that about memory and imagination.
Wow.
Or at least that's a person who comes up. Let's see. Oh, no, maybe she wrote. Oh, no, sorry. That's her book. She has a book called that. Memory and imagination. So you said memory and imagination are the same
thing called by diverse names.
Let me see.
I'll leave you to look that up. There's actually one more piece of poetry that the gypsy lady keeps reciting, because there's a wonderful character in here of the woman who is basically the mentor who has all the information about being a gypsy, and she says, I think literally 3 times, the way you walk is thorny, though through no fault of your own, but as the rain enters the soil, the river enters the sea, so tears run to a predestined end. This is one of the most poetic monster movies I've ever seen.
Okay, I found it. It's Thomas Hobbes.
It was Hobbes.
The Leviathan, yeah.
All right, well, there you go. Okay.
So also, I had the notes too, like along those same lines. Like it's also, there's a lot of where they go back and forth talking about psychology. Even beyond the supernatural. Like, well, I don't believe that he really turns into a wolf, but could he, have these urges? Could this be? And I think, and it made me think again, something we've talked about off and on maybe, but I think a lot of the best horror is either has some psychological content or deals with some psychology that maybe we don't want to deal with. In the way that science fiction allows us to, deal with real problems or social issues a lot of times, but taken to a different step. So it's like, oh, well, you're taken from that, so it's not so,
So explain that
fresh.
To me, though.
But I think that a lot of these movies, I think the best ones have some of that,
But he does. Larry Talbot comes back, and when he gets bit by a werewolf, he's supposed to be impressing everybody. He's the heir to the estate. He's going to meet everybody in the town. He's flirting with a girl he just met. And he gets bit by a werewolf.
He flirts with her by spying on her with a telescope.
Oh my gosh! First of all, okay, I want to say a couple things. Number one,
let's get into the character of Larry Talbot.
We'll get back to what you were saying about the wolf thing. But the thing with the telescope, I cannot believe.
Can you explain the thing with the telescope?
Okay. So he's looking through this awesome telescope that's part of the estate that he's now in I guess the dad's still there, but he's the heir to it, but his father's still there too. So anyway, the point is that he is there. It's his family's estate.
Which trivia, by the way, he was off in California working on telescopes. So
yeah, right. So he's looking through this awesome telescope, and he happens upon this beautiful woman who is looking at herself, admiring herself in the mirror, and it's just so very 40s, the way she's, I guess it's really 41, so it's really kind of 30s, the way she just kind of keeps looking back and then turning around and looking back and just kind of pulling on various parts of her jacket. I'm just like, that's just not how anybody looks at themselves in mirrors. But anyway, so he's watching her, and then he immediately goes over to the shop below her apartment and sees her there and makes a comment about the earrings that were on her dresser and like how he's psychic and that's why he knows it. But then he's like, no, actually I know it later on. I know it because I was looking at you through this telescope. And I'm like, why?
Well, I like his whole
this, you weirdo.
His whole opening line is stuff about like he could have played it cool.
I know.
Well, I actually wrote when I first saw it. I'm like, man, this guy, like his dad, doesn't have, he doesn't have this telescope to look at the stars. He's just like spying on the village, isn't he? And then sure enough, right immediately after wrote that note down, all of a sudden,
he's looking at
Larry Talbot's like, hey, who's around? Oh, look. And not only that, but I should go down and open. That should be my opening line. Hey, I know what's on your dresser. That's the way to get chicks. Maybe in California that works. I don't know.
Well, he is really very, very, kind of pervy, the whole thing. Like, the fact that as soon as he knows she's engaged, she's like, who cares?
By the way.
He's, trying to kiss her. And it's just.
By the way, also, I think looking at his dad, the actor who plays his dad,
Claude Rains.
I think, his mom must have been huge.
Yeah.
Either that or
I know. It was a ridiculous casting choice. I mean, he's not significantly older. I think we've figured out that he was maybe 17 years older than
Claude Rains is 17 years older than
Lon Chaney, but that's according to the age. And we've been debating about whether Lon Chaney was actually 30, because according to the
I have a comment about that because I saw that on the Facebook.
Yeah,
it is very important to note. It is very important to note that Lon Chaney Jr. was a heavy drinker who also liked getting in fights.
Right.
So if he doesn't look 35 years, because I've never heard a single story about him lying about his age. And I've read a lot about Lon Chaney Jr.
I agree. I've never heard that he was so, that proud that he would lie about his age. I found one reference saying that he was born in 1902.
Yeah.
But I'm saying maybe this is a guy that's a victim of his own hard living.
Yeah, but so here's my question: if you're 35 years old, which is not that old, right? This is a 42-year-old man talking, but still, if you're 35, I mean, is getting in a lot of fights gonna make you that puffy and that?
Yeah,
and that,
for sure.
Drinking might.
Drinking will. Yeah, the drinking will, and he is huge.
Well, and if you've had your face broken, for sure.
Lon Chaney Jr., the amazing thing here is that, it's funny to think he didn't start acting until his dad had already died. There's a movie that I watched when I was a kid, because I used to love Universal biography films that were just complete BS from start to finish. But there was a movie about the history of Lon Chaney, and it ends, of course, with Lon Chaney dying, and in his dying breath, he takes his makeup kit that says Lon Chaney on the top, and he writes Junior so he can hand it to his son with his dying breath and pass the mantle of acting on to his son, which is just such utter nonsense. Nevertheless,
you know that they actually filmed part of this on the set from The Hunchback of Notre Dame, which starred his dad.
Oh, I'm not surprised at all.
Yeah.
But Lon Chaney Sr.
I don't know why I'm saying Notre Dame like it's they call it Notre Dame.
But Lon Chaney Sr. was not built like this. But Lon Chaney Jr. is a hulking mass of a man, at least compared to everybody else in this film.
Yeah.
He's only 6'2". I mean, so he's actually not. He's not as tall as Christopher Lee. But he just seems enormous because he has these shoulders that are about a meter wide. He's just a big dude, and. Yeah, he looked to me, I swear to God, Claude Rains keeps talking to him as though, you'll learn, you're bloody insouciance. He doesn't say that. But it's like he treats him as though this kid is 22 years old and has just come home. But I was like, this guy's got to be 50. No, he's 35. He's just a very, very unfortunate 35.
Well, and then Bela Lugosi, who plays the gypsy, fortune teller.
Mm-hmm.
His mom is played by what's the woman's
Maria
name?
Maria Upinskaya.
Yeah, she's only 7 years older than him, which is kind of funny. But she plays his mother. But they were wonderful. I mean, they were just such a wonderful.
She looks like a million years old. I mean, what a great face, but come on.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying. It's kind of funny that these guys are further apart in age, but they look closer than the others two are.
Well, Elizabeth on the Facebook page brought up that that the love interest in this movie, Anchors, is 23. The actress is 22 years old.
That's always the case. Every single movie. I mean, there is this wonderful Facebook meme that goes around, that's about that Johnny Depp always has. His love interests are always 20-something, no matter how old he gets.
I'm not pointing out that it's inappropriate or appropriate that she's 12 years younger, because somebody who's 12 years younger, I can wrap my mind around that.
Sure.
What but she doesn't look 20. Does she look like, if you go out
I can buy her as 23.
Yeah, I totally would have guessed.
You snap her fingers and say, hey, who's 23, and get the women.
I would have said 25. I would have said 25 tops.
Yeah, me too. I would have guessed mid-20s. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I guess so. It's just I'm so accustomed to 23-year-olds looking like they just sort of, rolled out of bed and walked into history class, and
well, it's a different time period.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. There weren't any of those back then.
There's an observation somebody made a couple of years ago that young people in this period wanted to look older, and now basically everybody likes to look young. So if we go out, it's very likely that we will wear jean shorts and whatever the heck. And that is just not the case here. If you're of a certain class, and that might even, if you're middle class or up, you're going to dress okay. You're going to wear a tie. You're going to wear slacks. You're going to, put yourself together.
Right. And corsets if you're a woman, and lots of makeup and do your hair up. Right. Absolutely.
So here's a question I had about Larry Talbot, because we're going to see this character a lot. This movie is about how, Larry Talbot gets bitten by a wolf and starts to deal with this terrible curse.
Okay, so a couple of things I want to say there. One is, just trivia-wise, that wolf that he got bitten by was actually his own German Shepherd that he fought with.
Oh, awesome.
Isn't that cute? But then as far as so this is where that metaphor of with Germany thing place. It says in the documentary that the script for the Wolfman, and by the way, I think it's interesting that the Wolfman is the wolf space man. It's not one word. But anyway, influenced by the writer's experiences in Nazi Germany, that he'd been living a normal life in Germany only to have it thrown into chaos and himself on the run when the Nazis took control, and then just like how it's his normal life thrown into chaos, and he's on the run once he's turned into a werewolf, and then also that the Wolfman himself can be seen as a metaphor for the Nazis as an otherwise good man who is transformed into a vicious killing animal who knows who his next victim will be when he sees the symbol of a star on them.
I don't believe a word.
No, it's from the DVD.
That's actually absolutely, Jason. That's actually absolutely true.
Really?
Yeah, that's what it is in the DVD thing.
But I mean, it just feels so. I mean, I would buy the idea of the SS, having a group called the Werewolves, but this idea that, to me, saying that Larry Talbot's dealing with werewolfism is akin to Germany dealing with Nazis.
No, but it's not. It's the deal is that the writer himself had these experiences in Nazi Germany, and that's how he's writing about it, is through this monster metaphor. So he's the one saying this. It's not every other person reading it.
He fled Nazi Germany.
Yeah.
Right, as many of these guys did. I mean, that's where we got the brain trust for Universal. So here's my question. So if that's the case, all right, that still fits into this notion of we're watching Larry deal with this curse. But that gets really complicated, because what does it mean if I am a German and now I'm dealing with the curse of Nazism? Because we are meant not to associate ourselves with the people, the good people of whatever little town this is. We're meant to associate ourselves with Larry. Larry doesn't flee. Larry doesn't not become a werewolf. Larry what that means is that Larry has allowed himself to become a Nazi and is trying desperately to warn people, I'm a Nazi now, so run for your lives because I can't control my being a Nazi.
That does happen.
I
actually knew that actually happened. I actually knew a Nazi soldier growing up who my father knew, who talks about how, he actually never, he was captured pretty early on, so he didn't actually do much. But he talks about how you didn't have a choice. You were part of this. It's just like getting drafted. You are part of this culture.
What an interesting read on that.
Well, he was a fascinating man.
Okay, so here's a question, though.
Yeah.
All right. To me, a lot is made in this film of, the curse, of werewolfism being a curse, of a split mind being able to bring these things on, as Tony was talking about. But it's complicated in this movie because he really does become a wolf. It's not that.
Well, in the original script, and again, they changed a lot when they started getting into filming. In the original script, you were never supposed to see the Wolfman except in like reflection or in shadow, and is going to be ambiguous whether or not he was really a werewolf or if it was all in his mind. And in fact, the fact that he fights a real wolf,
yes,
a lot of people think is a holdover from when they were trying to keep it ambiguous.
In other words, in that reading of it, he could get bitten by a real wolf, and then his unhinged mind leads him to believe that he's becoming a werewolf.
But, because it's kind of weird to me that he gets bit by a wolf-like German Shepherd, but he only turns into a man with the hairy face and hairy hands and hairy feet.
Again, the sort of popular belief amongst fandom is that was like a holdover from the old script that for some reason they didn't bother to change. Now, I have a fan wank theory on that. Is that because Bella is an older werewolf who's had the curse longer, is just started to turn all the way into a wolf, and that's how
that was one of my takes as well. That far as if you wanted to, like, it's very easy to make that in the same way that Dracula is a more powerful vampire because of his age or agelessness, I guess, his time on Earth and drawing power, and I kind of see that too. I mean, it looks like in some ways it looks like a mistake. In other ways, you're like, well, he's been transforming for so long that this is taken full on.
My other theory is Bela Lugosi didn't like wearing heavy. I mean, he did it. He did it for Igor, and he did it in Island of Lost Souls.
Yeah.
But he wasn't really a fan of having his face obscured because he had that actor's vanity. So my other theory is that maybe he just did it. He refused to be made up like a werewolf, and they had to wing it.
That's interesting.
But that's I've never heard anything to bear that out. That's just a theory.
I think it's entirely possible they just didn't give this any thought. I mean that they were only going to spend the money to transform one actor into this. Because this is a big deal to cover him and all that, all the prosthetics and the yak hair and all that stuff. So they probably didn't give it as much thought as we are.
Well, this is one of the last Universal monster movies. They all got reduced to being B pictures after a certain time. So this was considered a big deal to Universal. They pumped a lot of money into this.
And it's pretty impressive that they were willing to do that again, because just to get back to that context thing that Joya was talking about. This is 1941, so we're talking about 10 years after Dracula. They're talking that in 1935. They're talking about 6 years now after they already tried one werewolf movie that didn't do well, and now they're trying again. They're going to try one more, which is amazing because let's face it, the Wolfman is a wonderful character and he sticks around. I mean, somehow it's isn't it remarkable when you think that they fired once and it was a miss, and they actually tried again and they gave us Larry Talbot?
Well, I think a lot of that is because Henry, for all of talking about, Lon Chaney Jr., Henry Hull is kind of, he doesn't exactly exude.
Yeah.
You don't really ever develop the level of sympathy that you develop for Lon Chaney Jr. Lon Chaney Jr. has a certain charisma to him that the other picture is very much inappropriately so because it's Werewolf of London, but it's got this British stiff upper lip quality to it, and I think Lon
is really watchable. There's something about it. We talked about how he's giant and he's doughy and he probably drinks too much, but there's something.
I'm not a big fan of his. No, I feel like he's just kind of pitiful. And then he's also creepy. He's pitiful and then he's creepy with the way he's all pervy with that woman. It was really funny.
He's not a perfect guy though, and I think in some ways that makes him a more modern character than if he was just a completely virtuous hero. The fact that he is out being a wolf on girls in the town.
Yeah, and that's right. And he can't shoot the wolf. Well, so here's a question. By the way, he's an expert shot. We don't know anything about what he's been doing except for that, at least for the last couple of years, he's been working on telescopes and other stuff like that with some optics. He said something technical, but some like big optical companies in California. Is there? Okay, forgive me if this is going too far. is there anything dark in Larry's past that could attract this thing that happens to him when he comes back home? You know, is there something unpleasant that we don't know about that could make him the prime target?
Well, I mean, it certainly fits with the whole prodigal son, you know, coming home thing. You know, so you're going to be biblical about it because, you know, who knows what he's been up to that then the dad welcomes him back.
I guess as far as the prodigal son story before he actually comes home. I mean, because that story
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, you're talking about the past.
Yes. You know, the prodigal son goes into the big city and he does all kinds of sinning. We don't know what the hell Larry's been up to.
Yeah.
You know, and he could have done terrible things, or he could have just been in the war. You know, 18 years. I mean, you know, we don't know what he's been doing, and
yeah. Hey, so I want to ask you. I wanted to throw in like the quotes that their 8-year-old kid, was saying. One thing I wanted to ask you about was the silver cane. But before I get into that, I want to say not silver cane, but silver-headed cane. When he was looking at the canes, you know, that the girl,
quote unquote,
Gwen,
flirting with the girl.
Yeah, Gwen is like picking up canes and going, "What about this one?" And he's like, "No, I don't like that one. What about this one? I don't like this." So Kevin just goes, "Why doesn't he just pick his own cane instead of having her offer every single cane and then he turns it cracked me up.
Well, I mean, he's doing what a lot of guys do when they're trying to pick up a girl. He's trying to keep her talking.
Right. There you go. I'll tell her that was the answer, and that made me laugh. But anyway, so why the silver-headed cane instead of just? I mean, the whole thing about the silver bullets is that's supposed to be the only thing they can. But then all of a sudden they throw in or anything silver, and I'm just like, why?
Well,
why
it's well, the whole idea, you know, the folklore with this is silver is pure, and it symbolizes purity, so it can kill things that are not pure, but it doesn't have to be a silver bullet. Silver bullet's just handy because you don't have to get too close to a rampaging werewolf.
Right. It's amazing he doesn't get shot by a silver bullet in this movie.
Yeah.
They mention him, but both werewolves that get killed get their heads beaten in with a silver cane, which, by the way, is a pretty freaking brutal way to kill an animal.
Yeah, horrible.
Well, that cane prop is pretty awesome, though.
Yes.
Yeah, it's actually made of rubber because they wanted to be able to they didn't want to hurt anybody. That's the only prop that remains.
I'll bet.
It's like in somebody's personal collection.
I'm shocked, by the way, because rubber isn't really the most resilient material to last.
I know, right? It's in the collection of this kid that, but now he's not a kid anymore, but he was a kid at the time.
Bob Burns, probably.
Yeah,
right.
Bob Burns.
Bob Burns, yeah. You know, one of for a while they kicked around changing the title from the Wolfman to Destiny.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that makes sense when you think about, okay, everybody in this town is talking about werewolves. He picks that cane. You know, he goes to that gypsy camp. You know, so it is like tumblers on a lock. You know, everything. Yeah. You know, you are going to become the Wolfman, Larry. You don't have any choice. This is the way things have to be.
He's even destined to attack Gwen because he sees the star on her hand, and he's like, well, that's.
Well, isn't that amazing? The star only appears to the werewolf himself, and he can tell who his next victim is. This is all psychological. Look, we've seen movies that actually did that. You know, like Blood and Roses, that film that we watched about vampires. You know, that actually does follow along. The person is convinced that this is their destiny. You know, and they kind of get sucked into it. I'm glad they didn't really go that route here, because I'm glad they're really. If this movie didn't have Larry turning into a yak-haired wolf man guy, I don't think we'd be watching it today. I mean, it's hard to imagine that it would have survived. You know, I think I like that it's a monster movie. But and this is complicated, because what makes us love these things so much is the essential cheesiness of the monsters themselves and how much we love to see them. And yet, that's not the part that we want to pick apart, which is the psychological aspect. I don't know what to do with that. I'm just saying that I'm of two minds about the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, if you want like an arty version of this, you might as well you can go watch Cat People, which is a perfectly good you know, horror film of this time period, and
you're right about Cat People.
Owes very much to the Wolfman.
No, you're absolutely right. Cat People basically takes the sort of the challenge of this movie and says, well, what if we did that? What if we did a movie where maybe she's turning into a cat and killing people, but maybe it's all just in her mind? And that's a very, very psychological movie. I love Cat People. I also really like the later one with Nastassja Kinski.
Well, I mean, the fact that he doesn't have any bite marks on his chest when they say that he's been, he says he's been bitten.
Well, that's because it's the 40s, and they wouldn't show gore.
No, but they actually make a point of saying that his bite marks have disappeared.
He heals like Wolverine.
Yeah. So that
Wolverine heals like
psychological. that leads to the whole psychological thing. What about the girl, Gwen, played by Evelyn Ankers, who, by the way, had the most horrible time making this movie because, first of all, Lon Chaney was just getting a kick out of scaring the crap out of her in his makeup. And then there was like this bear fight with the wolf man, and the bear got away and like chased her around the sound stage.
Wait, what? A bear fight?
They initially had a bear fight with the wolf was supposed to fight with the bear, but they had a real bear, and the bear got away and chased the actress, and then he like took off, I guess. So they didn't get to keep using the bear, but apparently the bear scenes are in the trailers. And then the poor woman is supposed to be down on the ground in the mist, in that misty thing. Lon Chaney and Claude Rains have a scene. And she was down there so long that she passed out from the chemicals.
Oh, no.
And nobody noticed. So it's like she practically almost died pretty much. Like the crew eventually realized she was missing, and they finally found her. Sounds like the worst.
Evelyn Ankers actually didn't really enjoy acting in general. She pretty much was just a meal ticket for her ailing mother. And the moment she got a chance to retire, she did.
Wow. That's amazing.
Well, anyway, but what did you guys think about her and her character?
I mean, I think she's only supposed to be there. No disrespect to her, but I think she's merely pretty. I mean, I think that's pretty much all there is. It would be so interesting, wouldn't it, if they had picked somebody who had a little sort of, road hardened, put away wet feel to her herself, if they had picked a woman who, oh God, what's the name of the woman who used to be on Big Valley? I'm trying to think now. You know what? It doesn't matter. If they had picked more of a character actress to be sort of more who could crack wise with Larry Talbot and stuff. There could be other things, but this character is forgettable. No.
I think that they went with someone like her though, because again, they're going for that fairy tale like quality, and she is
Linda
very.
Evans?
No.
No, this is Barbara Stanwyck. I don't know.
Barbara Stanwyck is exactly who I was talking about.
Barbara Stanwyck.
I mean, she works well enough because she comes off like she's buying into what is going on. Like the three most interesting characters in this movie are Sir John and Mileva, the gypsy woman, and Larry. I mean, the really, if you're looking at like who are really the interesting characters in this film, it's those three.
Yeah. Yes. And it's asking too much to actually have like a character actress or somebody with some odd wisdom to her, like Barbara Stanwyck. That's just not going to happen. Let's face it. This is an ingenue role. It's going to go to an ingenue girl, and that's how it's going to go. But why Larry doesn't make it out of this? I don't think that's a spoiler to anybody in any way. We've out to spoil these movies, and yet he's back later. And I think Larry, Lon Chaney Jr. keeps getting better at playing this role because he plays it over and over again. How does he come back? Do you know? Because he's dead. At the end of this movie, he is freed from the curse, and he's good and dead. He's been beaten about the skull by a certain.
In Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, grave robbers break into the Talbot family crypt, and they remove the wolf bane that has been put around his body during the night of the full moon, which causes him to resurrect for reasons that are never really fully explained. But you could just go with it as some random supernatural event. It's actually a really awesome scene, and Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman is a movie I would love for us to do one day, because the first half of the movie, which is just basically devoted to the Wolfman, is filled with awesome stuff.
By the way, I forgot all about that scene you just talked about, but I love Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. So how many movies does this Wolfman appear in?
Let's see, it's Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, then Frankenstein, House of Dracula, Abbott Costello Meets Frankenstein.
Yeah, that's like 5, I guess.
Yeah, and he's the only actor that played the only actor in Universal Horror that was the only one that played the character throughout the golden age of Universal Horror. Like all the Dracula, Frankenstein, all those, the Invisible Man, the Mummy, all of those had multiple actors. The Lon Chaney Jr. really owns this character.
Yes. It would be hard to imagine another actor playing that character, although, in fact, it's happened. Benicio del Toro played exactly this character in The Wolfman, which I think undoubtedly we're going to get to in a couple of weeks. We're going to come back and talk about
it. Benicio del Toro, I don't want to I want to save this for when we actually do that, but Benicio del Toro strangely looks a lot like Lon Chaney Jr., and I never noticed it until that movie.
Interesting.
I love Benicio del Toro. I can't wait.
Yeah, they do a lot of interesting things too. Like, you know, they have him like kind of stand on his tiptoes, kind of mimicking, you know, like wolf legs, even though that, you know, it's not going to work as a human. But they do a lot of. He's really trying, and even though he is kind of pathetic by the end, you know, I think I still like the idea of his struggle with, like, you know, here I come here, I'm trying to deal with my dad being estranged, this wolf thing comes along, you know, I don't want to do this, and yet it's forced upon me. He's really intrigued by how the gypsies seem to accept it and also see it as a destiny thing.
Yeah.
You know?
John Landis has this great quote about the Wolfman, and I talked about it when we did American Werewolf in London, but I'll repeat it here. The Wolfman is like a cancer patient, but instead of his cancer killing him, he becomes immortal and he starts killing everything else around him.
Yeah, right. And it's such a terrible time for it. You know, I talked earlier about, you know, maybe there's something he's done that deserves it, but it doesn't even matter. What Tony just said, he comes home, and this is a time where you know where the story is supposed to go. This might very well be one of those sort of soft lens dramas where, you know, he and his dad are going to have some weird adventures and eventually come to terms with one another and blah, blah, blah. And that doesn't get to happen. That's probably what his fantasy is. But instead, he gets bitten by this damn wolf and he starts killing people. That is not what this man had planned for his life. And there's a tremendous amount of tragedy to it when you watch it. It's sad. It's truly sad what happens to Larry. Yeah. Although
a couple in my notes, a couple other things too. Like I have like when he's transforming, not only is that an awesome makeup job for the time, but it made me like I have Godzilla foot slippers, and now I kind of want Wolfman slippers, like, but like modeled after those. Cause that
you could do exactly
awesome.
That scene. You know, you could pull off your socks and go, "My feet are turning green," and then you pan down, and then
I really do like, but like, because you can get kind of like Chewbacca slippers and werewolf kind of slippers and stuff, but I want some models right after that because I just those like it's so cool looking and it would be awesome.
Also, you know, I actually think that the makeup the Wolfman makeup actually got better throughout the different, like it got a little bit more elaborate. Like here it's a little bit more minimal. I think once Jack Pierce really started figuring this, because you look at Werewolf in London, which I actually think in some ways is a very effective makeup, and it's extremely, extremely minimal, and it's sort of like this, I don't know, Jack the Ripper werewolf in a deerstalker coat and cabbie hat, and it's a very he's creepy, but he's actually very, you know, I just watched that again in preparation for this, and he's an extremely creepy werewolf. In some ways, creepier than a lot of werewolves that are a lot more elaborate. But it's a very dialed back makeup, and this was them dialing it up from that. And it's. I think if you look at the sequels to the Wolfman, they got more and more. The makeup just got better and better and better. Yeah. Although,
in one of them we saw it was actually a mask, right? Doesn't he wear essentially a rubber mask in Abbott and Costello? Or...
No, he has rubber prosthetics, which
right.
Jack Pierce always worked right out of the kit. So the only thing that you really see on the Wolfman in this that's not out of the kit is the rubber wolf nose and the gloves. But he would make the face out of the kit, so it'd be a little bit different every time. When they started doing all these rubber glue-on prosthetics, continuity got better. But that's basically what got Jack Pierce booted out of Universal. He didn't want to change with the time. So they found somebody who would.
He's using a bunch of hair. He's using spirit gum, I guess.
Spirit gum. Yeah, very, very old-fashioned. Of course, old-fashioned techniques. But Jack Pierce was a genius. I mean, some of his makeups absolutely hold. I think the Frankenstein monster from the Boris Karloff Frankenstein films. I think that holds up 100%.
That's an astonishing makeup. That just sears into your brain. It's hard not to picture that makeup. And everybody, the real test, and this is also true of Lon Chaney Sr. with Phantom of the Opera. When you look at the Boris Karloff Jack Pierce makeup on Frankenstein, and you see other people try to imitate it in other movies, nobody seems capable of doing it. And that's really funny to me that 20 or 30 years later, people try to do the Frankenstein makeup, and they always botch it. It doesn't look right. They can't quite get the way that Jack Pierce was able to build up that forehead and stuff like that. And same thing with Phantom of the Opera. There was crazy stuff that Lon Chaney did with that makeup, and nobody can quite figure out. How did he get his nose to stick up that way? And what's is it? I heard that it was cellophane tape, but that doesn't quite work. How does he do all this stuff?
Yeah. I wonder now. I know we're talking about the makeup and stuff. I wonder, if Shelley could see the Frankenstein monster, would it be like what King thought of Kubrick's The Shining? Would she go well, that's kind of what, yeah. I just, these tales that are long past, their original creator, or the legend, what would they think, Especially since some of these become
it's just a gag.
The icon,
So, Stoker would love Lon Chaney, I think.
I think so, too.
Yeah.
Actually.
I think Mary Shelley would probably not be happy with Boris Karloff. Although she might just love how crazy it is and think it was, a delightful if vulgar entertainment or something. But
you have to think, with Shelley, they were already making plays,
right.
bastardized versions of Frankenstein after the book was published.
And she thought that was delightful. She thought that was a trip. She didn't even seem to want any money for it. She writes these letters talking about those plays, and she just thinks to hoot that people are making crazy plays based on Frankenstein.
So she probably just would be happy that her creation had continues to endure, and probably will outlive all of us.
Yeah.
But I guess you can't ask for too much more as a creator then, really.
Yeah.
That's true.
I definitely, dialing this back into werewolves, I definitely think that without this movie, I don't think werewolves would be kind of one of the linchpins of the horror genres the way they are. This really is the prototype werewolf movie. There were not that many beforehand. In fact, the only really one of note that I can think of off the top of my head is Werewolf of London, and it just, for whatever reason, did not take hold the way this one did. And
there's a really hilarious. Oh, go ahead. Continue. I'm sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt.
Well, no. You go ahead.
Tony and I have, and I'm sure you've seen them too. Paul Naschy over in Spain made a hilarious series of werewolf movies. They're not intended to be hilarious, but they are.
Oh yeah.
Where God,
those are just awesome.
And he does a bunch of them. He played a character called, it was just like Larry Talbot, he was called Valdemar Valinsky. And in this case, he sort of inherited a family curse of werewolfism, if I recall. And it's just about this dude who, has to grapple with turning into a werewolf and the women he's in love with and how he's got to get rid of them before he kills them and all that stuff. But it's so groovy, 60s and 70s and grungy Euro trash horror, and they're wonderful. I mean,
they're delightfully trashy. Man, they're fun. Oh man, those are good.
I view those movies almost as universal horror fan fiction.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't think that's out of the realm. Like,
that's
again,
right.
And I don't mean that as derogatory at all.
No,
I can. I mean, it kind of is.
Copyright doesn't work internationally anyway.
So horror is that way. I mean, like I said, these, for better or worse, and people may rebel against it, and people may go, well, actually, there was this, and this that was in this time period. But I think, by and large, these are the films that started people wanting, like, people who are now, top directors or were top directors or, throughout, and that's passed on. These Universal movies were what they saw as kids and went, this is what I want to do. I like horror. I'm a horror kid. I'm going to make this, and I'm going to put my stamp on it. But in general, these are the seeds for American horror and past outside of America as well, but definitely like our iconography comes from this. Like, no matter
and
what,
Europeans take that American iconography and they start filming it around, real old European castles and bringing some European sensibility to it. And you get this just weird sort of backwards and forwards folklore going on. That's actually why I love 70s European horror so much, is because it lends a sort of weird classic credence to what are essentially Californian ideas, 20th century Californian ideas. There were 12, by the way. I just looked it up. Paul Naschy made 12 Wolfman movies. So,
wow. Well, that sounds like a project.
I know.
Track down and watch these.
Oh, I'm pretty sure that they're probably available on Netflix, by gum. I wonder.
Wow.
I will find out. Anyway, we should probably wrap towards our final thoughts.
Yeah, we made a vow that we weren't going to go longer than the actual movie was.
Yeah, because this movie is a very brisk 70 minutes. So let's get our final thoughts. Same direction. We'll do, what was it? Tony, Julia, Drew, and then I'll go. So, Tony, final thoughts, The Wolfman.
Yeah, I mean, I really do enjoy the movie. It's brisk. It doesn't. There's some problems here and there. Definitely. Like, I think Julia brought up some of the same things that I'd kind of forgotten about. But we had kind of the same notes. But I think, like, as Wolfman as we know it, origin story, and just the iconography, the makeup, how it reflects its time period and everything. I think it's pretty great. I think earlier on, I think I gravitated more towards like vampire movies, but I think maybe I blame Underworld for being like, man, maybe werewolves are the way to go. After the twittering, simpering, idiot vampires that hang out in the mansion in that stupid movie. Like, I'm just more like...
Or you can go the Twilight route and just have both.
Oh, not even.
But, yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed the movie, and I'm glad we're doing this series. Like,
oh, yeah. What I want... I'm thankful to Drew for coming up with the concept of this series, in fact. Julia, final thoughts, The Wolfman.
What was the quote that you had from Katerina that...
Oh, yeah, well, it's when he's fighting against the wolf, she's sitting there, our 8-year-old sitting there on the couch next to us, and she goes, when the wolf attacks Larry Talbot, and she goes, okay, that is the most unlikeliest thing that will ever happen. Because she was very offended that the movie would suggest that wolves would just go attack people.
Yeah, she's really into wolves. Like
she
her
could
room.
not be quiet about it. She just kept going, "No, wolves don't attack people. Everything they're saying is wrong."
Yeah, her room.
Wow,
her room
awesome.
is devoted to wolves. We went to the wolf sanctuary. She's all about wolves. She reads. She knows like everything about wolves. So
now she should read more about werewolves.
She's really, really upset at the.
Jason would be happy.
I think she's really upset that werewolves would attack people because I guess what we should tell her is that the werewolves are the worst part of humans. They're not wolves.
Right. Exactly.
Well, and Werewolf of London, they say that they're the worst qualities of both. But I've always kind of in my head thought that the reason why werewolves attack people is because of the human side.
I would totally agree with that.
The most primitive human, yeah. But anyway, that was fun. I knew there was a funny line. And then the one that I wrote down was that at one point he walks back into the house having been out as the wolf, and he comes back into his house, and Jason goes, he's tracking mud all over the house, and Katerina goes, not the most important thing ever, but okay.
Nice.
Cracks me up too. Because the guy has just been a wolf and killed someone, and this is Jason's commentaries. He's tracking mud in his house.
I get no.
Anyway, so that was I just wanted to end with those amusing notes. So I think we're gonna have to watch more of our horror movies with the 8-year-old.
I agree.
Have some more.
I agree. Next week, Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah, no.
Actually, I think that makes a cool addendum to the series. Any horror movie that can be watched, extra color commentary would be amazing. Just write those notes. Just write those notes down.
All right.
Drew, final thoughts on the beginning of our werewolf retrospective?
I'll never have final thoughts on the Wolfman. I'll probably be thinking about the Wolfman in my deathbed. But my final thoughts of the night. Is this a perfect movie? No, it's not. But it's pretty good, and it's held up to the test of decade after decade after decade and generation after generation after generation. And I would not. This is one of those movies, and we do a lot of movies on here, and we've come across a lot. But I can safely say, this is one of the movies that really shaped my interest in the horror genre, and I remain fascinated by it to this day. And I'm just so I thank you for indulging my werewolf fetish, guys, because this is going to be a lot of fun.
So my final thoughts, I'm very excited that we're doing this retrospective because these are going to be some movies that I'll be excited about seeing because I haven't seen a number of them. We're going to do a handful of werewolf movies, and I've only seen a few. And as far as this movie goes, I love The Wolfman. I'm really happy that we watched it. I like Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman better, but to be honest with you, I think this movie is only 70 minutes long, so, it would make sense to watch this before watching Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman anyway. And if you have, there's not an 8-year-old I know who would be disturbed to watch the Wolfman. So I recommend this for the whole family, of the weird whole family.
Meanwhile, I'm living in my own horror movie over here because we have a family of snakes living in our house.
Oh, geez.
I'm literally just was like, what was that? I just felt something on my arm. I'm so paranoid that there's going to be a snake on me at some point in the near future.
You just need to call Samuel L. Jackson.
What? Yeah, right? Luckily, they're garter snakes and not horrible.
Yeah, and also,
snakes.
seriously, I really believe that they're moving towards the basement and you needn't worry.
Yeah, and that's where our children live, by the way.
They're garter snakes. They're harmless garter snakes.
And then there was the couple whose whose children switched from being wolf kids to snake kids.
Snake kids.
And they were raised by snakes who lived in their basement.
What was that movie called?
And that's a new.
That was what was the movie with the snake woman? That was
it was The Reptile.
Oh well, no, yeah, that's the Hammer movie. The good call, yeah. But I was thinking about the one with Hugh Grant.
Lair of the White Worm.
Lair of the White Worm. Yes, God, my brain isn't working this evening.
Oh,
so,
man, that reminds me. I do need to, and totally aside on the horror thing, one of my iconographic movies from being a kid was the movie Hiss with a bunch of S's, where the guy slowly turns into a snake through snake science, I suppose, in the 70s. And
snake
I need to rewatch
science?
that. So, yeah, evidently. Snake.
I think the scariest movie I saw as a kid, I don't know why I saw it, but was Kingdom of the Spiders. Man, that was freaking horrifying.
Yeah. Remember that movie? We need to do 70s
features.
Animal disaster.
Yeah.
I want to do Squirm, that one where in the trailers they've got the worms crawling out of people.
Thank you. No, thank you.
All right. Endorsement.
This is where Julia checks out.
Yeah, I will not be participating in that.
Horror.
You guys can get somebody else to watch the Squirm movie. I would watch Piranha again, though. That was kind of funny.
Yeah, absolutely.
Watched that recently.
Okay, let's do endorsements. And Tony, we're back to you.
Let's see. Well, again, things have been cheap, but I do, and I already endorsed it on the webpage. But a friend of mine has his short. There's ABCs of Death Part 1, and now ABCs of Death Part 2 has the M letter is open for people to interpret. And so they have, like, you know, you can have your interpretation, you know, that you filmed, and you vote using Facebook. So you have to have a Facebook account, so you can only vote once. But they have a like page, and his is M for Mario, and I think it's pretty awesome. I need to post, another friend of mine has M for Metalhead, and how could I resist that? But I need to post that as well. But, you know, I don't want to cross out their votes, but definitely it's seen a marked rise, and it would be cool to have a friend of mine, you know, win and have his short in this anthology. So that
we'll be sure and mark it on the Facebook page. So
yeah, it's up there, and I'll put M for Metalhead up there as well. But M for Mario even had a Japanese director actually lended his ideas on how to get blood splatter perfect, and told Josh that, which we met through Fantastic Fest. So that was really cool. But yeah, that's my endorsement. Is, you know, I always tell people, if I know somebody who's cool, I'll definitely talk about your stuff, because the cool people need to get together, because there's so many bastards in the world that you know,
I agree.
We have to work like 5 times harder, or else the bastards win, and that's just, I can't abide by that. So
there we go.
Vote M for Mario and or M for Metalhead.
Very cool. Okay, Julia, do you have any endorsements for us?
Well, we just watched a movie that was kind of fun called The Raven with John Cusack. And it's about Edgar Allan Poe. I don't know if
which it came out last year, but it's on Netflix. I think we saw it.
Right.
Yeah.
Is it good, by the way?
It was pretty good. We liked it.
I mean, it's in my queue, I think. So.
Yeah, he's Edgar Allan Poe, and there's a series of murders that look suspiciously like stories from his own writing. So it's a really interesting movie. I personally just love John Cusack, and so I thought it was a lot of fun. It's filmed like in Serbia, but it's supposed to take place in Baltimore, which is kind of funny. But I guess because it's historical.
Well, but it looks
Baltimore.
it looks like a believable,
a
believable mid-19th century Baltimore. Honestly,
yeah.
That's very stylish. To be honest with you, Tony, I felt like it was. It actually felt like an Italian Eurotrash movie with like 10 bazillion times more money.
Mm-hmm.
But in the end, it felt like a movie that they could have made in the 1970s, you know, directed by Antonio Margheriti, you know.
Cool.
So, let's see, who went next? We went Tony, we went Joey. Okay, Drew, endorsements?
Is he still there?
Yeah.
Heard it sound.
I watched a documentary yesterday with some friends of mine called Blackfish, which is horrific, although not horror, which is about killer whales and SeaWorld and how they're kept in captivity and the problems with that, and actually about how there have been a lot more deaths and injuries related to that than you're probably aware of, because SeaWorld does a pretty good job of covering it up.
Wow.
So, you know, if you were even, I'm not interested in sea life or anything like that at all, and I just found this extremely gripping. So I put a big thumbs up for that. I'm also going to plug Danger Cakes, my wife's band. Jamie, who has been on the podcast with us a few times, is going to be playing the Formula One Fan Fest this weekend with Everlast in Berlin. But they are playing the Mobile One stage at 5 p.m. on Saturday. That's November 16th. So please, if you're in the Dawson area, come out and see them.
Great.
Very cool. My endorsement is similar to one that I did a couple of weeks ago. I have picked up the first 5 or 6 issues of the new X-Files comic from IDW, because I was reading the classic one by Stefan Petruka, which was just genius. The new series is called Season 10, and Chris Carter is doing the stories. Anyway, it is fantastic. So yeah, it just feels exactly like the show. If you can ignore the movies, the comic book is really doing exactly what they do with Buffy the Vampire Slayer and doing a wonderful job. So that is it for me. It is such a delight having a chance to do this every week, and please like us on Facebook, leave reviews on iTunes, tell your friends, tweet, complain, join in the festivities on the Facebook page, and it's going to be really fun retrospective. Thanks, everybody, and have a wonderful week.
Take care.
All right.
Thanks.
Night.